The U.S., the war in Gaza has caused tensions to soar at college campuses across the country. At Columbia University in New York, a group of protesters has occupied a building on campus after the school began suspending students who refused to leave a tent encampment of pro-Palestinian supporters. In recent days, demonstrators have clashed with police and officers have arrested more than 100 people on that campus. There have been similar escalations at universities across the U.S., with students demanding that their schools cut ties with Israel. We get the latest developments at Columbia University from our correspondent in New York, Jessica Masurier.
Columbia University is essentially on lockdown right now since students occupied the hall behind me in the early hours of Tuesday. The media can't get in. Access is restricted to essential staff and students who live on campus. Demonstrators who are protesting over the war in Gaza began occupying Hamilton Hall in the early hours of the morning. Once they got inside, they barricaded the doors. Now, the latest move by these protesters who want their university to sever investment and business ties with Israeli firms comes after talks between students and the university reached deadlock. Students have refused to leave. The school has said that it's going to start suspending students involved in the protests. The NYPD has a presence here outside the school, but not inside. The university's president has said that some Jewish students feel unsafe, and she described a hostile environment for students. Well, a professor who I spoke to a little earlier on described a tense atmosphere on campus and said some people are getting fed up. But the protesters are resolute. They have put up a banner renaming Hamilton Hall Hinds Hall after a 6-year-old girl who was killed by Israeli forces in Gaza. This latest move to occupy parts of the university echoes an April 1968 protest over racism in the Vietnam War, when police used violence to clear the campus. Many are hoping that this time round that will be avoided. But we can certainly see that this is a moment of crisis in America, with increasing outrage over the United States' support of Israel in a war which has claimed the lives of thousands of children.
And that was our correspondent in New York, Jessica Masurier, reporting. For more on this story, I'm joined now by Aldon D. a professor emeritus of sociology and Black studies at Northwestern University. Thanks so much for being with us here on France 24. You know, school administrators are really trying to navigate this tension between free speech versus hate speech. Where do you draw the line if you're the head of university in the U.S.?
Well, I don't think it's a real problem of free speech versus hate speech. I think that the problem is that the students are disturbed and very bothered by the fact that over 30,000 people have been killed in Gaza, and that they are very, very concerned about the fact that the United States is supporting it, sending weapons and sending money so that these people, in their view, are being subjected to genocide, and that they see that as the problem that they are protesting against, and not one of free speech and hate speech.
Just to push back a little bit on that, at the same time that these protests are happening, some Jewish students, at many campuses have reported an increase in anti-Semitic speech. So at what point do administrators have to step in if they feel that, some students are being threatened?
Well, I think that the university has a duty to protect all of its students. We don't know whether it's objectively true that the demonstrators, the protesters, are really targeting Jewish students and making it unbearable for them in terms of threats to their life and so on. But the point of protest is to make things uncomfortable, to disrupt business as usual. And so this was the same thing with the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King and others were charged with disrupting the peace, and that there were many white people who did not like it and felt threatened by it. But the point of protest is to create some forms of disruption to make sure that things as usual will not continue and that the issues will be confronted. I think that as far as I've been able to determine, is that many of the demonstrators are going beyond the call of duty to make sure that they are not targeting and harassing Jewish students. Now, you just mentioned the Jewish students. The other side of that coin is that is the university concerned with the fact that they are bringing in police who are arresting students? Sometimes it appears to be, physical confrontations. Universities are suspending students and expelling students and so forth. And so these young people feel as if they've been betrayed by the university.
Yeah.
So it's a real issue that's developing here in America.
Let's talk a little bit more about that because, ideally universities are supposed to govern themselves. Many larger schools even have their own police forces or security, and it's rare to involve outside authorities. And this relates to the concept of, academic freedom, that universities are supposed to be a place of expression and for learning for students. And when outside forces get involved, i.e., the Congress or police, that something has gone wrong. Like, how do you view what's been taking place in recent weeks at universities across the U.S., and what does it mean for academic freedom?
I think that academic freedom is really under a great threat here in the United States now. You must know that here in the United States, there are serious movements to ban books, not to teach various histories of people in the United States. So there's a very anti-intellectual movement that's going on here. And so I think that when you look at this, we do have to be very concerned about academic freedom. It is a place to debate and to let issues and values clash and to try to synthesize them into some forms of greater freedom. I do believe that part of what is going on is the weaponization of the notion that outside agitators are taking over the movement. It's the view that these students don't know what they're doing, that they are being controlled by others, that they don't have real issues and so on. And so I think that is a way to undermine the protests. I also think that there is the weaponization of the notion of anti-Semitism. It seems to me that most of the protesters, the demonstrators and so forth are not anti-Semitic. They have an issue with the war in Gaza. And that is what they are focusing on and not being anti-Semitic. I'm not saying that there have been no instances of anti-Semitism. I don't know. But I do believe, having talked to some of the students, especially here at Northwestern University and so on, that the last thing they want to do is engage in anti-Semitism. But university leaders, politicians have made these claims that what this is really about is anti-Semitism, rather than the concern about millions of babies and women and civilians being murdered in Gaza.
I want to ask you a political question before I let you go. As we know, there is a presidential election in the U.S. coming up in November. President Biden has reacted to the protest at Columbia, just not long ago by condemning the move by students to occupy a building on campus, saying it's the wrong approach. This really highlights a problem Biden has with young people, doesn't it, when it comes to his unwavering support for Israel as we look ahead to this election coming up in November?
President Biden has a major problem. There are many young people in the United States who do not agree with the Biden administration's position regarding the war in Gaza. They view it as morally wrong and reprehensible for us, the United States, a democracy, to be complicit with a right-wing government who appears from the students' point of view, to be engaged in genocide. You have to remember that for many of these students and for others in the United States, that their taxpayer dollars are being used to sponsor the war, that their taxpaying dollars are being used to produce these weapons that are being used against Palestinians and so forth. And so the young people are there's a segment of young people who are very upset with Biden. They're saying that they will not vote for Biden. They're saying that they are always forced with this choice that you should make a choice between the two evils, the better one. And there are students and young people who are saying they no longer want to make the choice between evils, that they will not vote for Biden. So I think that Biden really needs to listen to these young people because they are becoming more and more upset. They're becoming more solid in their views that they will not vote for him. I believe that if the Biden administration is able to get a ceasefire, to bring the war to an end, to move toward a two-state solution, that he can turn this around. But I think if he just takes the position of condemning the protests and not really addressing their issues, is that he could end up losing the election because of this.
We'll have to leave it there. Aldon D. Professor Emeritus of Sociology and Black Studies at Northwestern University. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Parts of Asia